hot singles near you. I was never the type to pay attention to neon-colored ads blinking on my screen at 2 in the morning. I'd usually ignore them, maybe laugh at their ridiculous claims. So when I first saw one that said, "Hot single ladies in your area," I scoffed and scrolled on. But after a few moments of mindless browsing, I noticed the ad changed. This time, the text read, "Hot singles, only 2 kilometers away." I paused. Ads often track your location, but it felt weird to see the exact distance spelled out. I shrugged it off. Just a marketing ploy, nothing new. I got caught up reading a thread for a while, then refreshed. That's when I saw it again, but the distance had shrunk. Hot single, near you, 500 meters. There was a face on the banner, a brunette with unsettlingly pale eyes. The iris so washed out it was nearly white. She stared through the screen with a knowing smile. Something about her expression felt too personal, like she knew I was watching. A quick shiver ran through me, but I chalked it up to late-night nerves. I forced my attention elsewhere until another refresh brought up a third ad. This time, it covered the top of the page, big and bold. "I'm closer than you think. 100 meters away." My stomach twisted. I peered out the window, scanning the empty sidewalk lit by a single flickering street lamp. Nobody was there. I tried to reason it out. Ads can be hyper-targeted, sure, but 100 meters? That was practically my doorstep. I told myself to ignore it, but it got worse. Another banner, loaded with the same woman, only now her features were off. Her face looked elongated, her grin stretched a little too wide, almost like a predatory snarl. The text underneath read, "We see you. 50 meters. I felt a chill roll through me. We? There were multiple figures in the background now. Other women with the same pale eyes, all leaning forward, as if pressing closer on the screen. I tried to close the page, but it froze. A pulsing ad replaced everything. "We're right here. 10 meters. My heart thudded. 10 meters is practically my front door. I jumped from my chair and ran to the window, ripping the curtain aside. Again, nothing. Just my silent street. But the atmosphere felt heavier, like something was watching from just above the glow of the lamp. When I stumbled back to my laptop, the ad had changed once more. "At your door. Open up." A sharp clatter made me whirl. My front doorknob jiggled, metal scraping metal. Someone, something, was trying to get in. My eyes flicked back to the screen, where a new image had replaced the older ads. It was a photo of my house, taken from the sidewalk outside. My porch light was on, the potted plant to the left of the door, and in the banner, that brunette stood near the front steps, unnaturally tall, face partially obscured by a swirl of static. She looked even more distorted, with her eyes fixed in a soulless stare. I heard a second jolt at the door. Fear roared in my ears like white noise. I checked my phone. No signal. My Wi-Fi icon flickered. Then came the final blow. The ad changed yet again, displaying my exact address beneath a brand new photo of me, bathed in the monitor's glow taken from outside my window. I could see the silhouette of someone behind the glass, holding a camera or phone, capturing me in that moment of terror. Hot single ladies at my address. Click now. Before I could do anything, slammed the laptop shut, call the police, my entire screen went black. The house lights flickered, then died. I stumbled in darkness, heart racing. A faint glow came through the curtains from the street lamp. I tried to catch my breath. I tried to push away the thought that something stood right outside. The doorknob rattled once more, then fell silent. I don't know how long I stood there in the darkness, waiting for the next sound or movement. Eventually, the light surged back on, and my laptop whirred softly. Its screen remained off, but the little power indicator blinked tauntingly, like it was daring me to open it again. I couldn't move, couldn't bring myself to check if that horrifying image was still there, couldn't look out the window to see if anyone or anything was lurking. Now, whenever I close my eyes, I see that ad, the warped faces. Those eyes too pale, too hungry. They came so close. Maybe they're still out there in the night, waiting for me to click, waiting for me to give in. If you see them, don't refresh, don't click, don't even linger on the ad, because once they know where you are, they're not selling you a date, they're coming to collect. And the next time you check your screen, you might find your own face staring back at you from the other side of the glass. And this time, you won't be able to shut the page. Something is seriously wrong with the train station in my town. Everyone just called it the station. The modest name betrayed its true nature, though, and did little to warn you of the gargantuan size of the thing. Dozens of trains coming and going at all hours of the day, both above ground and below it, and hundreds of market stalls and shops littering the property. Everyone in town knew about it, knew the rules and the nature of it. When I was young, I recall heading there with my mother to peruse the shops, and I remember being absolutely stunned at the size of it all. The items and services being offered were staggeringly diverse, and oftentimes downright confusing. As we made our way through, I noticed how many signs there were. Maps posted everywhere, and the same yellow warning sign on every corner. Return to designated overnight shelter, or vacate the property before sundown. A stark warning that I was too young to comprehend at the time. It's been years since that day now, and I hadn't visited the station since my mother passed. Another childhood memory fallen by the wayside as work, an ailing love life, and other adult responsibilities consumed my time. It was only last week that I decided to take a trip down memory lane and go check it out again. I had lost my job, and I needed something to waste time on. I figured reliving simpler times was as good as a time waster as anything. Certainly better than blowing all my money at the bar. So I hopped in my car and made my way there. 20 minutes later, I was walking through the entrance gates. The first thing that struck me when I arrived was something I had completely missed when I was a kid. The layout and architecture of the entire place was all screwed up, confusing. Just looking at the little paper map I got at the entrance, I could see that this place was built like a maze for whatever reason. Like the people who designed it were just scribbling random shit down. The strange nature of it all was driven home when I took in the actual scenery for myself. The architecture and layout of every building was absolutely bizarre, unconventional. It felt like a fever dream. I shook it off though. People come here every day, right? I would be fine. With my doubts safely tucked away in the back of my mind, I spent the day browsing the shops. I bought a few things and talked to a few people. It was pleasant, overall, and eventually I decided to make my way down into the subway portion of the station. I've never seen it before and wanted to take a look before I headed home. That was my first mistake. The subway had a completely different atmosphere than the station. The chatter of crowds and the cool evening breeze were replaced by the buzzing of fluorescent lights, stale air, and an endless maze of identical gray walls. It was suffocating, and I found myself uncomfortable very quickly after I'd left the stairs. About 5 minutes later, I found myself at the boarding station, and sighed in relief. The open space and groups of people did wonders to ease my anxiety. It even had a concession stand. I wasted no time getting in line to get myself a snack and a bottle of water. My stomach was growling. As I waited for my turn in line, I heard the rumble of a train. Moments later, it was pulling into the station, wheels screeching as it came to a halt. It was the first time I've actually gotten a good look at one of the trains here, and I wasn't all that interested until I got a proper look in the windows. Strange, alien-looking people were sat on the train. Men with insect heads. A large, hairy man who I was almost sure was Bigfoot. Reptilian creatures perched atop the seats. Every passenger looked like it clawed its way out of a 90s B movie or a sci-fi novel. It was utterly bizarre, and I was gobsmacked by the sight. I was still processing all this when the person in line behind me cleared his throat. Right, I was next in line. I stepped up and bought a few things, kind of mumbling, entirely on autopilot as I tried to make sense of everything I'd just seen. With food in hand, I made my way to a bench and sat down. I ran through explanations in my head and managed to convince myself that it was just me being paranoid, my imagination running wild. Surely those were just costumes, I managed to convince myself. I sat there for a while after that, just wrestling with my thoughts as the lights buzzed overhead. It was about 30 minutes later that I noticed a new sensation. I was being watched. I looked up and around, and I realized that every single person remaining in the station was staring straight at me. The crowd and I stared at each other for what felt like ages, and I began to notice things about them I hadn't before. Their faces and bodies were just wrong. Facial features distorted or missing, limbs bending and twisting at odd angles. Completely wrong, but subtle enough that I had failed to notice in my distracted state. Eventually, one of them pointed at the yellow warning sign on the wall, still staring at me wordlessly. I began to panic and fumbled for my phone to check the time. 9 o'clock. Shit. I instantly leapt from my seat and began to make my way back towards the stairs. The last thing I needed was to get arrested for trespassing after dark. Isn't that funny? All this creepy shit, and the only thing I was worried about was getting arrested or fined. Guess my brain just hadn't caught up with everything that was going on yet. As I hurried my way towards the exit, I realized two things. One was that the space I was in felt even more suffocating than before. The tunnels felt smaller, the lights brighter. It felt like the station itself was displeased with me being there. The second was that I had forgotten my map. My slight panic erupted into a full-blown freakout then. The thought of going back to get it was unnerving. All those strange people were still there, but going on without it was an equally terrible idea. A rock in a hard place. Eventually, I made up my mind, and I turned around to go retrieve it. Before I could take a step, though, I froze. There was someone else in the tunnel. A man I recognized from the boarding station. Seconds ticked by as we stared at each other, neither one making a peep. Eventually, the silence was broken as the man spoke. "Did you see the sign?" he said, completely monotone. Yeah. I was about to leave, but I forgot my map. I hadn't realized how late it was," I replied, failing to mask my unease. He continued to stare for a moment before speaking again. "Did you see the sign?" he repeated in the same tone as last time. Yeah, man, I saw the sign," I replied once more. The man took a step forward then, causing me to take one back. "Did you see the sign?" Same phrase, same monotone delivery. What the fuck was this guy's problem? "Yes, I saw the fucking sign. I just need to get my map so I can get out of here," I snapped, equal parts frustrated and freaked out by his weird behavior. He simply stared at me, completely unfazed by my response. Then he took a step forward, then another, and before I knew it, he broke into a dead sprint towards me. I swore and bolted in the opposite direction. Everything after that was a blur. Drab gray walls streaking by, overhead lamps blaring as I ran wildly through the subway tunnels. The entire time we were in chase, the man simply repeated that same phrase from before. "Did you see the sign?" I take a left. "Did you see the sign?" A right, then another right, then a left. "Did you see the sign?" I take another right. The only thing in the world at that moment was the sound of my panting, the thunder of footsteps echoing through the tunnel, and that goddamn phrase being repeated over and over again. Eventually, the man's voice got quieter, more distant. I didn't stop running though, not until I had stopped hearing him entirely. Once I was sure that I was alone, I collapsed against a wall, panting heavily in both exhaustion and relief. My lungs were on fire and my legs felt like jelly, but I was safe for now. Time passed slowly as I recovered, slumped against the wall with my heart beating out of my chest. Finally, I had calmed down enough to take stock of my situation. The realization of how fucked I was now nearly sent me into another panic attack though. I was lost now, with no map, and on top of that, my phone was dangerously low on battery with no service. The only things I had on me were a bottle of water and half a bag of Skittles. I got to my feet, weighing my options before deciding on the only real course of action. I began to walk aimlessly through the tunnels, praying to find an exit. Thank you all for listening, and have a wonderful day.